All right, so Joe, Pete Thamel had a report that came out. And it wasn't necessarily in all written form. I know that you sent me one, but I went and listened to the podcast today, okay, about the 10-minute segment that he did on this. So Pete Thamel is reporting that the playoff format that we saw in the 12-team expansion is not going to change here. Mainly his point in this being that the other conferences outside of the SEC and Big Ten did not want to lose money, and they voted no. So basically everybody outside of the massive two that are fighting for positioning here, okay, want to have a difference of format and buys is basically how I understand what he's trying to say, right? Other conferences, such as what he said, the SEC and Greg Sankey and Tony Bettini in the Big Ten, per his podcast, they are pushing for a different buy format because they don't want Ohio State and Arizona State to get those buys again. Basically how I understand just listening to him. Maybe it reads different, I don't know. But it seems as if the main course of what we're trying to get to here is that the playoff format's not changing. And I got to tell you something, buddy. This pisses me off to no end. Right? We were talking about the NHL earlier, and they're putting countries up against each other for exhibition games in the middle of the season. And we can't change a playoff format so that the Big 12 and Boise State or teams like that don't get buys. That is criminal to me.
Well, right. We're in this circumstance. I think it's actually like really interesting now that we got to see this exhibition and the competitiveness it created. I don't know. But by the way, I think I saw a tweet when we were just going live that said that was the most watched hockey game that wasn't a Stanley Cup game. It got like 5 million views, which is equivalent to some of the viewership of some of these big bowl games and whatnot that we've had over the past couple of years. I say this all to say, if the playoff committee was smart, they would bypass the ability for, and I know that they can't really do this, but the ability for the smaller conferences that shouldn't have as much say to be able to impact the outcome of this decision. There needs to be a change. I don't give a shit about giving a fair shot to the G5. That was all we saw in the damn comments. Every time we put out our freaking bracket reactions and our ranking reactions when they were doing those specials, we had all these losers that were going in and saying, well, that wouldn't be very fair. Boise State's, they deserved it. They earned it. Screw that. Screw that. I want to watch the best football games. We were deprived of the opportunity this first year of getting what could have been the most entertaining product. Boise State has I have no problem with them getting a chance to play. I have no problem with it. If they had squared off with SMU in the first round, that would have been a lot more entertaining than watching Penn State beat the shit out of them. That would have been so much more entertaining. Both of them, watching Penn State beat up on Boise State and SMU. There needs to be an adjustment here. It should not have a bye system that allows for crappy teams that won their conferences to be given byes. You win your conference, you get to go to the playoff. That's all you're guaranteed. It's disappointing that they're allowing the Mountain West to make that decision effectively.
All right. I'm going to go off the handles a little bit here. I need you to let me vent, okay?
Okay.
This is some grade A bullshit. It's some grade A bullshit. I'm going to be a little elitist here. And I know people don't like it when you do stuff like this, but I don't give a damn. Nobody in college football should be making decisions like this that don't have a massive weigh-in from the SEC or the Big Ten. I would have rathered, personally, Illinois, Ole Miss, South Carolina, name the teams in the Big Ten or the SEC that should have gotten in over Boise State and Arizona State. I understand the Arizona State run was fun, scatterboo, make of it what you will. SMU we came up with this delusional ass thought because SMU was in an ACC championship game against a shitty team in a shitty conference that they deserve to be in. They don't deserve shit. There's nothing more deserving than a team going up in the Big Ten or the SEC and competing and beating up and winning 9-10 games in that league. Are we stupid? Are we really that stupid about saying about what we think that somebody deserves SMU deserves because they lost close to Clemson. By the way, Clemson got their outright asses torn up by the SEC this year. The ACC champion got bent over and got spanked like a toddler who just threw food at the kitchen table. They got their asses whooped. And you're going to sit here and convince me or try to convince me that these G5 programs, that these below P4 tier programs deserve to have a thought, much less a decision in something like this. Are you stupid? That is how dumb this is. So everybody wanted playoff expansion. Everybody wanted the equality of it. Here's one thing. I am for equality when it comes to human being talking points. Yes, I am with you. Sports is not that. Sports is where you come to a place where you go on the field to determine who is the better man, who is the better team. That is what you do in competitive sport. To say that Boise State, the G5 teams, Joe, they get a vote in this, and the Big 12 and the ACC, they get a vote in this, that they get to come together and dictate how the playoffs is run is stupid. It is dumb. Put Illinois in there, put Ole Miss. I don't give two Rudy Poos. This isn't about a conference anymore. You want Boise State in there because it's some feel-good story. They got their asses whooped. Here's another truth. The ACC champion had no business being in the playoff. There, I said it. 0. Clemson had no business being inside. They won a conference. They won a conference. They were 0-4 against other teams in Power 4 conferences. 0-4.
My only thing is that I think that Clemson would have, if this playoff format was shifted the way that it was projected or pitched this offseason that Thamel is saying is getting shot down, that if there were no automatic buys and it was just the top 4 seeds get the bye, the top 4 teams get the bye instead of the way that it's structured, if Clemson had played, say, Indiana in the first round, that game would have been probably competitive. That game probably would have been entertaining. And we needed the filtration system that those matchups would have created, because the filtration system knocks out the weakest teams. The teams that were strong enough to get those wins and then to build a little momentum would have gone on to the next round to compete with the teams that had the buys. And then that would have been more competitive than some of the games that we saw this year. So I don't totally agree with the ACC did not deserve to get in. I think that if you win your conference, you deserve to at least be in the playoff field.
Okay, then what about SMU?
SMU didn't belong in. The more that I've thought about this, if you are an unproven team like SMU where you do not have a difficult schedule, they didn't. Indiana at least faced Ohio State. Like, at least they squared up with Ohio State, and we kind of got an understanding of what they were. SMU did not. The one opportunity that they had to prove themselves, they failed and they lost. Right. Well, and they also lost to BYU too. That was the other game there. So, but what I'm trying to get at,
all ranked teams.
Yeah, but wait, what I'm trying to get at here though, Blake, is the argument that was used by the committee and by others was that you shouldn't set this precedent of, if you go to your championship game, that if you lose, you could risk falling out because then teams are not going to participate, blah, blah, blah. It's going to create some big thing. Bullshit. If your team is not good enough on paper to have proven themselves and you need the extra point to prove themselves in your championship game, then you should have to do that. That's why I'm saying that we shouldn't completely remove the buys that go for the teams that do win their conferences, because there should be a motivation to do it. There should be a motivation to go in and to fight and to compete in order to get in to prove yourself. The championship game is not an extra pat on the head. It is a proving point. That's what it is. What?
Can I'm going to fight for South Carolina here then. Losing a bowl game versus going up against 4 of your last 5 opponents or ranked opponents. By the way, beating the ACC champion that they just got in. How about this? How about you go out there and you articulate why South Carolina's in above SMU? How about
they should have got that should have been the team that got in over.
No, I'm just saying in general. Think about this. Think about if you're Shane Beamer and you got to look your team in the face and say, "Hey guys, the team in Clemson that you just beat, they just beat SMU, and SMU gets to go in over you. By the way, their strength of schedule is in the 80s. They did not play close to the competition that you did. And everybody wanted to tell me during the season when I got yelled at by everybody, please, I got this shit bookmarked, yelled by everybody. Oh, well, they deserve it. They were in the ACC championship conference game. Are we so stupid? Like, that has got to be the dumbest thought process that I've ever thought about. So now, because Shane Beamer lost to a ranked Alabama team, oh, well, Blake, they lost on the last play to a ranked Alabama team who was 9-3 too. Get out of town, brother. They lost in the beginning of the season against LSU when their quarterback went out. Their quarterback went out. Bro, I mean, this is the dumbest solution in any sport. Let's call it what it is. At least in the people say the NFL model. The NFL's got 32 teams. You're talking about 100 teams that have a viable shot to get in here. 100. It's a massive difference.
I think the level-headed way of kind of just
you call me non-level-headed?
Well, no. Or actually, yes, I am. But to kind of frame
I'll give you this. Joe, I'm not level-headed on this. I'm not.
Right,
because
and you shouldn't be. Look, the main takeaway from this, though, is that it shouldn't be this hard to make changes when there's already clear evidence. Why would we risk another year of producing a shitty product? The playoff needs to be smarter than that. It needs to be. That's what, forget all the changes that you and I would make. The playoff committee needs to change their voting system, their decision-making system. You have a obvious example, and you don't want to always overreact to those things, but you have an obvious, clear example of a concern that was made in the lead up to this that comes to fruition immediately. You have to address it. You can't allow the Mountain West, because they got paid a shitload of money, because they got a lucky ass bye, that they're going to be able to be one of the people that puts up a fight for this.